Are you tired with dealing with uneven cuts and undercooked ribs when prepping your pork spare ribs? In this video, I'm going to show you 8 simple steps that are going to help you trim your spare ribs, giving you that perfect St. Louis style cut your barbecue guests are gonna love. Hey, welcome to Smoky Beginnings. I'm Corey, and if you're new here, I love to share all the barbecue knowledge that I've learned over the last 10 years. And I love helping you cook better barbecue. Today, we're talking all about how to trim pork spare ribs into St. Louis style cut ribs. These 8 tips I'm about to share with you are going to help you get evenly cooked and juicy ribs every single time. Before we dive into the trimming process, it's important to understand what St. Louis style ribs really are. When you buy a rack of spare ribs, it's pretty much just a whole rib cage that includes the breastbone and some cartilage. St. Louis style ribs are spare ribs with the breastbone and the cartilage trimmed off. That's going to leave a clean rectangular rack. And why does this matter? Removing the breastbone and the cartilage not only gives you a better presentation, but it also helps with even cooking. With the breastbone gone, you get a more uniform shape that cooks evenly and avoids those uneven, thinner sections that'll burn faster while leaving the thicker parts undercooked. Once you've got the ribs trimmed, you'll notice that St. Louis style ribs are much easier to handle, especially when it comes to slicing. Because of their even shape, the meat cooks more uniformly, making it simpler to cut through. This also helps with presentation. When you serve these ribs, they'll look like competition style ribs. And if you're grilling for a crowd, they'll definitely notice the difference. Tip number 2, prepare your workspace. You can't work with raw meat without the right tools. First, you're going to need a sharp knife. I recommend you using a boning knife or a flexible chef's knife. The key here is to having something with enough flexibility to get around the bones and the cartilage without damaging the meat. A dull knife can tear the meat, making the process more difficult and less clean. Plus, you don't want to take a risk of cutting yourself with a dull blade. So make sure that your knife is sharp and ready to go. A quick test is to slice through a tomato or a piece of paper. If it glides through easily, you're good to go. Also, make sure that your cutting board is stable. If you don't have a non-slip mat, get one, because a sliding cutting board can make the trimming process frustrating and dangerous. You also need paper towels on hand to keep your hands dry while handling the ribs. Having everything in place beforehand will make the trimming process go smoothly. Now, let's get to the fun part, the trimming. Let's remove the skirt from the ribs. The skirt is a thin piece of meat hanging off the side of the ribs. It doesn't cook evenly. Just grab your sharp knife and carefully cut along the edge of the skirt to remove it. Tip number 4 is how to find the rib tips. This is the part of the spare ribs that doesn't really fit the St. Louis style cut. It's the end of the rack where the bones curve and are covered in extra meat. You want to trim this off for that clean rectangular shape we're going for. Flip the ribs so that they are bone side up. Now from the end of the ribs, go in about 3 to 4 ribs. This should be one of the longer rib bones. Then you're going to take your knife and carefully cut along the bone line to remove the rib tip. The key is to follow the natural bone structure. So don't attempt to force your knife through. Use a smooth, controlled cut, and the rib tip should come off pretty easily. Now be mindful of where the bones curve and make sure that you're cutting at the right angle to get a straight, even cut. Once you remove the rib tip, you can save it for later use. These rib tips are perfect for smoking, or you can throw them in a stew or a soup. Don't waste them. There's still plenty of flavor left in those pieces. If you're new to backyard barbecue and want a little extra help with cooking times and temperatures, I've got a free guide that'll make things super easy for you. It covers everything from meats to veggies, and it's perfect for getting started. Just drop a 100 in the comments below and I'll send it your way. Now, you'll notice there's a membrane covering the bones. This is a layer of connective tissue, and it's important to remove it because it can make the ribs tough and chewy. Plus, it stops smoke from fully penetrating the meat. The easiest way that I have found to remove this membrane is to start in the middle of the ribs. When you pick up the ribs from the middle, there should be a natural bend. Take your butter knife and get under the membrane, and then with a paper towel or your fingers, remove the membrane. It should come off fairly easy, but if you hit a tough spot, just work your way around it. Make sure to remove all the membrane, especially near the bone area, because if it's left on, it'll create a tough texture in that section of ribs. With the membrane gone, your ribs are going to absorb more smoke. Now that your ribs are taking shape, it's time to trim away any excess fat. A little fat is fine. It helps with flavor, add moisture, but we don't want large, thick pockets of fat, especially on the back of the ribs. These can cause greasy and uneven results when cooking. One thing I do is trim a small section and then press on it. If the fat feels soft and pliable, it's perfect to leave. If it feels hard or thick, trim off more to ensure that it will cook properly. Another key point to focus on during trimming is ensuring that the meat's thickness is consistent across the rack. If certain sections are much thicker than others, they'll take longer to cook, resulting in some parts being overcooked, while others are underdone. As you work through the rack, check for any areas that look noticeably thicker. Use your knife to trim down these sections to match the overall thickness. While it doesn't have to be perfect, the more uniform that you can make the rack, the more evenly it will cook. Once you made those adjustments, the ribs should have a uniform thickness from one end to the other. This step makes sure that your ribs cook through evenly so that every bite is just as chewy and tender as the next. All right, we're almost there. The last step is to clean up any rough edges to give your ribs a nice final shape. Use your knife to carefully trim away any jagged or uneven areas you want. You want your ribs to look neat and professional because presentation matters just as much as taste. Once you've done that, give the ribs a quick rinse under cold water to remove any bone fragments or fat that might have stuck to them. After rinsing, pat them dry with paper towels. This will give you a smooth surface, and when you go to season them, you'll have a nice clean canvas. You now got your pork spare ribs perfectly trimmed into St. Louis style cuts. Follow these tips and you'll get evenly cooked, juicy and tender ribs every single time. But hey, if you're curious about another method, then check out this video right here where I show you how to cook ribs in a vertical barrel smoker. It's a different approach, but just as delicious. I'll see you there.